I'm Lisa. I'm the Barefoot Pampered Chef, and today we're going to make a really good family meal. It could even be, you know, a romantic dinner with a couple, but it's a really good meal, and it's actually fairly easy if you follow a few simple steps. So my first step is when you get a recipe, read it through a few times. Get used to it before you even cook it. You need to read it through, see what you need, what materials you need, what ingredients you need, even what cookware you might need. You may get to the last line and there's something that makes the meal itself and you don't have that item. So you need to read it through first. So I've read this recipe through a few times. We're going to make red wine braised pork ragu, and this is out of our Ragut Pampered Chef cookbook. So what a ragu is pretty much just a beef stew that goes over a noodle or rice or something to that extent. What I've already done is I already sauteed until crispy, so about 10 to 12 minutes, 6 pieces of bacon that I've crunched up into little pieces. And so this is that bacon. And then we poured off the bacon fat into a container that we're going to use actually for the cooking. Now it says to add back the rest of the pork or the rest of the bacon fat in somewhere in this meal. That's a lot of bacon fat, and I'm not adding that much back in. My bacon that I bought was a little too fatty for this meal. So what we're doing right now, the second step after you do the bacon and you save the bacon drippings, is I took a 3.5 pound boneless shoulder pork loin, and I cut it into cubes. So when you do a saute or a browning, which is what we're doing, you need to work in small batches of meat. And I know that's annoying because you want like a one-pot meal, but if you put in too many pieces of meat, you're actually going to steam it. You're not going to get that nice brown. And so I've had these going for about 4 to 6 minutes each little batch. And so it's getting that nice brown coating on it with the bacon fat. So you don't need to cook these all the way through because we're obviously going to cook this meal longer. So if there's pink, it's fine. We just want that nice flavorful brown taste on the outside of the pork. So I'm going to get this batch out, and I'm going to throw my last batch in. Before I throw this last batch in, I'm going to put in just a little bit more bacon fat. Okay, so it's not the healthiest dish. A little bit more of this. A little bit goes a long way. This is just a half of a teaspoon here. So 2 teaspoons, and then we're going to throw in the meat, which I've already salted. I already put just about a pinch of salt on there. So I'm just going to use my cutting board and throw that in. Now watch out because it may splatter a little bit. Pampered Chef does have a splatter guard if you're worried about that. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit because it's getting a little hot. Make sure all of those pieces, you can hear it, can't you? I wish I had a mirror to show you. But you can hear all those pieces sizzling. And if there's too many in there, they're not going to do that nice sizzle and get all nice and brown. So while that's going, we're going to get our vegetables going. So in here, I have 1 medium carrot and 1 stalk of celery. I'm actually going to run and grab another stalk of celery because that one was really small. And the thing you want to do before you start a recipe is called mise en place, which is to get your things in place in the quantities that you need. Because there's nothing worse than starting a recipe, getting halfway into it, and then going, oh my gosh, I don't have whatever you don't have. So I've already gotten everything in place, and I know I have everything for the meal. So like I said, about 1 big stalk of celery and 1 medium carrot. We're going to add to that 1 large onion. I've already just taken the peel off and just chopped it into 4. All I did. That's why I love these little prep bowls, because I can get them all set up. And I love sticky notes, so I have sticky notes everywhere. I have 6 cloves of garlic, that I've just taken the peels off of. I'm going to throw them in there as well. And then what we're going to do is, I'm going to show you this. This is the herb stripper. So you can put any of your stemmy herbs through here and just peel off the leaves really quickly. So I've done that with about a tablespoon of rosemary, fresh rosemary. Now fresh rosemary, you don't want to put in big whole chunks, so I'm going to throw it in here in the processor. And if we were doing dry rosemary, so it calls for a tablespoon of fresh rosemary. If you're using a fresh herb and you only have a dry herb, it's about 3 to 1. So you'd use 1 tablespoon of the fresh herb versus 1 teaspoon, smaller amount, dry, of the dry herb. So right now I have fresh rosemary, so I'm using 1 tablespoon. This recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of fresh thyme as well, which I do not have. So I'm going to throw in a teaspoon of fresh thyme, or of dried thyme later. So hopefully that made sense. So we're going to get all of this in here and throw my processing lid on. And get all these things nice and chunky. Now this is a ragu, so you don't have to get them minced. Just get them, you know, smaller pieces, or bite-sized pieces. Oh, look at the brown on these pieces. Can you see that brown? I know I'm dripping all over everything. But you just want to get that nice brown. As some of the chefs on Food Network say, that brown is flavor. Brown means tasty. So we're going to let that sit for just a few more minutes while I mince the rest, or, oh, I said mince. While I chop the rest of this up, not mince. Let's see what we got. Yeah, that's fairly good. I might chop it a few more times because I've got a big piece of onion in there. There we go, that's nice. So you always want to keep your recipe on hand. So I've already done my bacon, check, done. I've already done my pork in batches, so that's done. So the next thing that I need to do is remove that pork, and then we're going to add some things to the bowl. So this is pretty brown. All I did over here, I don't know if you can see this, but I'll show you here in 1 second, is I took a paper plate, lined it with some aluminum foil, just so I can keep all that nice dripping in from the beef as it, or the pork as it sets. And that way I can just discard that. I don't have another plate that I need to clean up. And it's just so simple. That foil will keep a little of that heat in as well. All these out of here. Smells so good. I'm going to show you some cool, neat things with our rock crock pot here in a second. So the next thing that we need to do is we're going to add back in our drippings, which I said I'm not going to use all of those. So I'm just going to use a little bit. Yeah, that's about good. And I'm actually going to save these drippings for later. I can use them in other cooking, and I don't need them all right now. So I just added those back in. Now we're going to add our vegetables. Just take my blade out of there and add those in. We're going to give these a nice saute. Remember, brown is flavor. So we're going to let these cook a little bit until they're nice and tender. So this is actually more of a sweat for the vegetables, but we're sweating them in grease. Sometimes that's what I feel like. So we've got those. Start sweating a little bit. I'm going to turn that back up again. I always like to keep a towel right next to everything so I can just tidy up as I go. We're gonna wait until those are softened, and then we're gonna add our pork back in and add a few other things. So the great thing about this rock crock is I can take this base and I can put it on the stove, on the grill. My oven's preheated to 325. I like how it sings to me, isn't that nice? Just nice. So I can put it on the stove, I can put it in the oven, I can put it on the grill, I can put it in the microwave, and if I don't feel like letting this cook for an hour like it's going to, after we do this in the oven, I can put it on my handy dandy rock crock slow cooker base. So I can set it and forget it. Isn't that great? I love this thing. I mean, how many times do you have a slow cooker recipe where it says, brown the meat and then add it? I don't have time to brown the meat and then add it and put it in a new pan. So I put it in the exact pan, brown the meat and throw it in, and I'm done. It's perfect. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. So these are getting a little bit tender, so that's great. We're gonna cook them anyway, so I'm not too worried about them getting completely tender. So now what we're going to do is return our pork to the dish. I'm just gonna dump all this yumminess back in. And this is a great way to get a piece of meat, like a 3.5 pound pork shoulder, to stretch a little bit. So if you have a lot of people to cook, a ragu is a good thing to do that, because you're not all looking for a big piece of meat. I'm just going to mix this up with the veggies. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add our wine. So I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit, because I want this to reduce a little bit faster so you guys can see it. And I'm going to add 2 cups of dry red wine, like a Cabernet. So there is that. And to reduce means to come down in size. So what we're actually doing is you don't have to be worried about feeding this to kids. Yes, it does have wine in it. But however, with the reduction, you're actually almost effectively boiling off some of that alcohol, actually a lot of that alcohol, and the water content in the wine. So you're just more getting the flavor of the wine. I'm hoping this starts bubbling in a second. Turn it up higher. So you're going to leave the lid off while you do that. Now, if I look, all right, so we did our bacon, check. We did all of our pork, check. We added the remaining drippings, half of them. Some onion, carrot, celery, garlic, and rosemary. And then we stirred that for about 2 minutes until they were nice and softened. And then we already had our oven preheated to 325. We returned all of our meat and we put in the wine. So with the wine, it says to go about 10 to 12 minutes until it's reduced by half. And we're going to stir that occasionally. Once that is reduced by half, which I may not be able to get to you here, so I'll show you what we're going to do. Once it's reduced by half, we are going to add 2 cups of chicken stock. I love bone broth, so I'm going to give you a quick tip on how to make your own bone broth. And this will take up just a little bit of time anyway. So with bone broth, it has really good minerals in it from the bones of whatever you're using, a ham hock, a chicken, or even beef bones. So what I do, because I like the lazy man's way out of making beef or bone broth, is I put my slow cooker on low overnight. And what I'll do ahead of time is, if you go to one of the stores and buy one of those rotisserie chickens, you can actually take all of the meat off and eat it for dinner, take all of the bones and the cartilage and put them in your crock pot. Just cover it with water. If you put too much water in, you're going to get a very watery, non-flavorful stock. So you want to just cover the bones with water. And if they're floating, you only want to cover where they were, not where they're floating to, because you'll never get enough. So you put whatever bone you want in there, a ham hock, beef bones, or your rotisserie chicken breast. Usually I like whatever bone has already been roasted because it gives a little bit more flavor. Then you let it sit on low overnight. By the next morning, you will have amazing broth, bone broth, very, very flavorful, great to freeze. What I actually like to do as a veterinarian is freeze it, put it into ice cube trays, and then for your animals, you can actually thaw one over their food daily, and it gives them some added minerals and nutrients. So this is a bone broth, a chicken bone broth. We have 2 cups of that. We're going to add either one 30-ounce can or 2 of the 15-ounce cans of crushed tomatoes. This one happens to have a little bit of sea salt in it. That's fine. Usually I try to get the ones that aren't salted. So that's that. And then we're going to add a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of dried thyme, because remember I didn't have the fresh, so it called for a tablespoon of fresh thyme. So we're going to use a teaspoon of dried thyme. We're going to use black pepper, just a pinch, and we're going to use 1.5 tablespoons of sugar. Now the sugar is going to cut down on the dryness of that dry wine. So that's the only reason that they add the sugar to it, is to just help cut down on that. Now this is bubbling. So I think I'm fine with how it's reduced. It probably isn't reduced completely halfway. You might want to sit there a little bit longer. So I'm going to add these things and show you. So we're going to add our broth, our crushed tomatoes, and our salt, sugar, pepper, and dried thyme. And it says here that we are going to stir in the bacon as well. So I'm stirring in my bacon that I got a little bit more blackened than I like. Oh well, no biggie. Brown is flavor, right? So we're going to stir in our bacon, our stock, our tomatoes, everything else, and we're going to cook it covered. So I'm going to put the cover on just until it becomes a simmering, just a very light boil. And we're going to pop it in the oven and leave it for an hour. And then when you're done, I'll show you how to serve it. So let me mix this up, pop my lid on, and I'll show you how to serve it really quick. Oh, that smells so good. The acidity of those tomatoes and the freshness of those tomatoes is just cutting through all of the richness of the beef or the pork. So we're just going to pop this lid on that, and I'm going to let that come up to a simmer. So the way that I'm going to serve this is I'm actually going to serve it over some penne pasta. Now, I love my micro cooker, and I think you guys have seen this before. What I did earlier was I put a pound of penne pasta, a pound of penne pasta in here dry, and then I covered that with just enough water for it, so it's about maybe 1/2 inch above it, and I popped it in the microwave for 10 minutes. Now, sometimes this will overflow. It's not too big of a deal. You just clean up your microwave with just water. And what comes out is beautiful al dente penne pasta. Now this penne pasta is a vegetable penne pasta, so it has tomato and carrots in it, which gives it its orange color. And what I'm going to do at the end is you can either just ladle this over the pasta, or I'm actually going to see if there's enough room in here that I'm going to actually mix it in really quick before we serve it, so it makes it kind of a full meal. So we just made red wine braised pork ragu. It was that quick. I mean, all I have to do is pop this in the oven and we have a beautiful dinner tonight. So all of these instruments you can find on www.pamperedchef.biz/Lisa Wright, LISAWRIGHT. And I would suggest for anyone with kids or who likes to have a quick meal to pick up the Rock Crock slow cooker, because not only does it come with the amazing base, it comes with the Rock Crock Dutch oven. And like I said, you can use this on the stove, on the grill, in the microwave, in the oven, in the slow cooker, wherever you want it. It's just an amazing product. So hopefully you will make a dinner like this sometime, and I will hopefully see you later with another demo. Thanks. Have a great day.